The Africa Month and day on which South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will be inaugurated as President, as we mentioned. Spokesperson Khusela Diko joins us now for more. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. And of course, congratulations to the party on winning another mandate. What's strategic this day of 25th of May?
Well, thank you very much, Tepitsins. Thank you so much for having us here. The 25th of May is recognized throughout the African continent as a day where we pause, we reflect, we acknowledge the successes that the continent has made, you know, just in terms of moving from colonialism, from apartheid, look at the progress that we've made over the last couple of years, and obviously seek to assess the challenges that still confront us. Now, it's quite profound that South Africa would have taken the decision to inaugurate the new president on this day, because firstly, it reaffirms our commitment to Africa. It also recognizes the extent to which, as South Africans, we remain grateful for the support and the solidarity and camaraderie that Africa would have extended to South Africa during the dark days of apartheid. But it's also speaking about Africa as our partners in development. So it's not just about the past, but looking to the future. So how do we use, you know, some of the successes that South Africa has recorded, celebrating 25 years of democracy, deepening democracy, institutionalizing it, but that not just for itself, but to advance the development of South Africa and the continent as a whole. So we see it as being quite symbolic, and to that end, we've invited heads of state from African countries, obviously from...
Do we know how many yet?
Well, we don't have, we do have confirmation, Tsepiso, of how many will be coming, but the minister in the presidency will be doing a full briefing on the inauguration, so some of those details she'll be able to speak to them.
But just this whole theme of Africa, African identity, African unity, is this what is going to characterize this new tenure, this Ramaphosa administration going into this new chapter, so to speak?
You know, the destiny of South Africa is intimately intertwined with the destiny of the continent, and I think the president has made that clear on a number of occasions, that if South Africa wants to achieve the aspirations that she has set for herself, it's important that we advance and protect and promote the African agenda. So Africa is going to be critical and central to the sixth administration going forward. And when you speak about it, it's about the opportunities that exist. It's opportunities, I mean, we've said that we're looking at investment-led trade as part of our of the work that we will be doing in terms of economic reforms and seeking to build our economy and seeking to create jobs for the people of South Africa. So there's a huge opportunity that exists on the African continent. It's a market of over 1 billion people that is largely untapped. We tend to you know, export a lot to the African continent in terms of finished goods, so it offers an opportunity for us to reindustrialize, to boost our manufacturing base and so forth. So Africa is critical and central, but more than just, you know, the investment side. South Africa, you know, in terms of foreign policy, we move from that which we've been bequeathed by Nelson Mandela, which is about building a more humane, equitable and inclusive society. So when you look at how we are then intending to take forward, for example, our chairship of the African Union from 2020, we do that understanding at the core of it is about also building a peaceful, not just a prosperous Africa, but a peaceful Africa where the guns are silenced, as we seek to do.
And just talking about that, obviously some of those agendas have already been set by regional bodies such as the African Union and us pushing forward transformation in the UN. But what projects are we going to undertake to illuminate those things beyond free trade agreements?
I was going to start with the free trade agreement, and I think you know, that's one of the most recent and I think the most prolific successes that we've recorded in terms of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And that's because, as I was saying, it taps into this huge market that exists for us to advance regional integration and really develop the economies of Africa. But we're collaborating with our African sister countries in a number of other areas. There's issues around food security where not much has been done, whereas Africa could and should be, the breadbasket of the world, ensuring that we're able to drive as part of building our economies, but also food security in general, an agricultural base. So there's quite a lot of advancement there. But also in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, Africa has tended to be left behind, in the first three revolutions that would have transpired. And now is the opportunity for us to see how we can leapfrog the use of technology in Africa, but also a skills revolution, Tshepi. So at the end of it, everything that we do will not find resonance if we have not built the necessary skills base, especially amongst young people on the continent, for us to be able to take those aspirations forward. So these are the areas of cooperation, obviously in the issue of defense, and that there's quite a lot that we're doing in the defense space, and that's because of our commitment, as I said, to realizing the AU aspiration to silence the guns by 2020, which coincides, with the chairpersonship the chairship of the AU that South Africa will have. So we're doing a lot of work, in Mozambique, seeking to ensure that we assist in areas like in Malawi recently with the floods and so forth. So it's a lot of areas, and the continent does, to a large extent, continue to look to South Africa to play that role as the most industrialized country on the continent, to ensure that as we seek to rise and build our economy, we also bring the rest of the continent.
But there's also the
us.
Negative aspect of it, beyond just harnessing that natural wealth that South Africa and Africa has, especially talking about knowledge management system, but culturally, you talk about that in your theme for Africa Day, Africa Month. The xenophobic attacks or Afrophobic attacks have created quite a dent in our image. What are you looking at improving that kind of negative PR?
Well, South Africa is working very hard, firstly with our law enforcement agencies. For a long time, we've maintained that a lot of what is termed xenophobic attacks are not necessarily that. These are criminal activities that may spark from whatever, that trigger may be at that point in time. Like the recent case that we had in KwaZulu-Natal, where you would have individuals, yes, one of South African origin and one of, I think it was Malawian in this recent case, who would have an argument, a personal argument, but it escalates it to being called now a xenophobic attack. But we're also not blind to the fact that there are real socio-economic challenges, Tshepi, so that South Africa continues to face, like many other African countries. And in seeking to address those, perhaps in seeking to vent their frustration, it has happened that South Africans would then look to foreign nationals as being the root cause of that. And this is work that we are continuously doing to engage the people of South Africa, to firstly, get everybody to understand that it is in our interest that we all develop together. We engaging with the governments of various countries, also to explain the challenges that South Africa confronts, but also seeking to get them to support us and assist us, because there's a very real problem which exists in South Africa, which is about undocumented immigrants.
Allow me to jump in there, Ms. Diko, on the supporting each other as brothers and sisters. One of the things that have been lamented is South Africa's drive to educate its citizens about the role other African countries played in its own democratization and its own liberation. Are we looking at using think tanks, using Africa's history to drive that forward?
It is indeed one of the aspects that we're looking at. I mean, for example, this Africa Month, what we're doing is to tell those stories. A lot of them are untold. I mean, you look at just a country such as Nigeria. When President Ramaphosa visited Nigeria this year, he would have also been told stories about how Nigerian families used to contribute, each family used to contribute money to a solidarity fund to assist us in the struggle against apartheid. I think we don't speak about a lot of these things. But you see, Tshepi, so having won our liberation, and I think where we are going is to say that, yes, let's focus on development, but also let's ensure that as we welcome anybody else into South Africa who may come from any of these other countries, let's work together to ensure that people are documented. Let's work to ensure that they're integrated in our communities, that we're able to account for them, we're able to plan for them. And I think that these are some of the areas where we are still weak in, but it's become a focus area that government is looking at much more. But I continue to hold the view that the President has expressed that South Africans are not inherently xenophobic, and we should at all times seek to ensure that we address the root causes of some of these issues, and which, as I said, may not necessarily even be xenophobic in their origin.
And beyond xenophobic, the argument has been made that it's often directed at black African nationals and never those of the fairer, complexion, that white foreigners are never attacked.
I don't think I have a properly academic and theoretical answer to that. What I can say is it could be a variety of reasons. It could be an issue of people sharing the same spaces. You go into the deepest rural areas of South Africa, you will find people there who come from Somalia, who come from...
The battle for resources, basically.
Exactly, and that's the space that we're contesting. But Sabisa, as we discuss this, we should never forget that as South Africans, it's also important for us to seek to attract skills that do not come from this country. I think a lot of the challenges we're facing are obviously at the level of your lower skilled, your survivalist type of economy. But we have a responsibility to ensure that South Africa is seen and is indeed a welcoming place, for highly skilled foreigners who may be coming from other parts of the world, who can do a lot to assist us confront the challenges that we do in places like ESCOM, in places like the 4IR that I was talking about. There are a lot of countries that are much more advanced than South Africa, and it should be incumbent upon us to go out and attract those skills in order to assist us build our economy.
Right. Just a final message, Ms. Diko, to other African countries who are holding elections throughout the rest of the year. What is South Africa's message to them? Obviously, you had your own challenges, but you came out of it with what some would say is largely a credible process.
A largely credible process, yes. In fact, we were, quite happy with also the messages that we would have gotten from SADC observers, from AU observers, who would have declared our elections generally free and fair. I think that the road to full democratization of Africa is well on course. When we speak about ensuring peace, stability, and the deepening of democracy, it's not for the sake of democracy on its own. It's a necessary precondition for Africa to develop in the way that she would want it. So we continue to respect, the sovereign integrity of countries to choose their own form of government. But at the core of it, we're saying that it's about an Africa that is at peace with itself, and we will continue to support.
And that's a good note to end it on. Thank you very much for joining us, Presidential Spokesperson Khusela Diko. And that's all we have time for on this week's episode of African Perspective. Remember that next Wednesday we take a look at Malawi's upcoming elections. The Globe is up next. From all of us here, good night and thanks for joining us.